Do you believe in destiny? Have you ever sat alone and quietly asked yourself, maybe I'm just not good enough to live in the United States? Maybe I will never speak English fluently. If you are tired of practicing listening, reading, and speaking English, if you feel embarrassed every time you open your mouth, if you are thinking about giving up, this story is for you. Because I was that person. And one ordinary morning on a subway train in the United States, I met the man who would later become my husband. Can destiny be accidental? At that time, I had been living and working in the US for less than a year. Everything still felt unfamiliar. The air was colder than I expected, especially in the Northeast. The winter wind did not just touch your skin, it went straight through you. The climate was different, the rhythm of life was faster, and people spoke English like it was music I could not keep up with. At work, I tried my best. I attended meetings. I took notes. I smiled. But inside, I was exhausted. Listening to native speakers all day felt like running on a treadmill that never stopped. By the time I got home, my brain felt heavy. Here is something important. Most people think they give up on English because grammar is difficult or vocabulary is too big. That is not the real reason. The real reason is emotional pressure. When you hear people speaking faster than you can understand, your brain activates a threat response. Neuroscience explains that the amygdala, the part of the brain that detects danger, reacts to social embarrassment the same way it reacts to physical danger. Your body feels unsafe. Your mind freezes. So when you think, I'm bad at English, it is often just your nervous system trying to protect you. During those early months, I avoided small talk. I avoided long conversations. I was afraid someone would say sorry, again and again after I spoke. Every sorry felt like a small failure. Slowly, I became quiet. Too quiet. One morning, I got on the subway like usual. I chose a seat by the window. I put on my headphones and played a slow English podcast. I could not understand everything. But I stopped translating word by word. I simply listened to the rhythm. I told myself softly, train your ears like a native. Let your ears adjust. Trust the process. The train moved. The doors closed. And then something small happened. A man standing next to me smiled and asked, "Is this seat taken?" Such a simple sentence. A beginner-level question. But my heart started beating fast. Not because it was romantic. Because it was real. It was spontaneous English, outside my control. I answered, "No, it's free." My voice was not perfect. My pronunciation was not smooth. But I spoke. And that moment mattered. He sat down. We started talking. Slowly. Naturally. He asked where I worked. I answered in short sentences. I did not try to sound impressive. I focused on being clear. Something interesting happened. When I spoke slowly, he slowed down too. Human communication has something called mirror neurons. Our brains naturally adjust to each other's rhythm. Conversation is not a competition. It is a dance. That subway ride lasted maybe 12 minutes. But it changed something inside me. For the first time since moving to America, English did not feel like an exam. It felt like a bridge. I realized I had been putting too much pressure on myself. I wanted to sound like a native speaker immediately. But language learning is like building muscle. You do not go to the gym for 1 month and expect a completely new body. You do not move to the United States and expect instant fluency. Fluency grows quietly. It grows in small daily repetitions. After that day, I kept thinking about one question. If I had chosen a different train, if I had stayed silent, would my life be different? Can destiny be accidental? Maybe destiny is not magic. Maybe it is simply the result of small brave decisions. Saying no, it's free instead of pretending you did not hear. Staying in the conversation instead of escaping it. If you are watching this because you feel stuck with English, I want you to understand something deeply. You are not incapable. Your brain is adapting. Studies in language acquisition show that consistent exposure to natural input, even if you only understand 60 to 70%, gradually rewires your auditory system. Your brain becomes more efficient at recognizing sound patterns. But this takes time. And patience. That subway conversation did not immediately make me confident. It did not magically fix my grammar. But it changed my identity. I stopped seeing myself as the girl who is bad at English. I started seeing myself as the girl who is learning. And that shift is powerful. Living and working in the United States continued to challenge me. The climate was cold. The culture was direct. The pace was intense. But something inside me warmed up that morning on the subway. A small belief, maybe I belong here. Maybe my voice deserves space. Sometimes the biggest turning point in your life does not arrive with fireworks. It arrives with a simple question. Is this seat taken? And your answer, even if imperfect, becomes the first step toward everything. A stranger in America. If you have ever landed in a new country and felt your confidence shrink the moment you opened your mouth, you already understand this chapter of my life. After that first subway conversation, something had shifted inside me, but I was still, in many ways, a stranger in America. Living and working in the United States sounds exciting when you say it out loud. It looks impressive on social media. But daily life is not a highlight reel. It is early alarms, long commutes, cultural misunderstandings, and weather that does not care about your feelings. I moved to the northeast region of the U.S., where winters are long and serious. Back home, winter meant light jackets and cool evenings. In America, winter meant icy sidewalks, gray skies at 4:30 p.m., and learning new vocabulary like wind chill and black ice. Climate affects more than your wardrobe. It affects your mood. Research in environmental psychology shows that reduced sunlight can influence energy levels and even emotional stability. When the sky is gray for weeks, your motivation can quietly drop. At the same time, workplace culture in the United States surprised me. Meetings were direct. People expressed disagreement openly. In many American offices, saying "I disagree" is not considered rude, it is considered productive. But for someone adjusting to a new culture, that directness can feel personal. During my first few months at work, I often stayed quiet in discussions. Not because I had no ideas, but because I was translating in my head. By the time I formed the perfect English sentence, the conversation had already moved on. Many English learners experience this delay. Cognitive science explains that second language processing requires additional working memory. Your brain is decoding sound, translating meaning, checking grammar, and planning response all at once. That mental load is heavy. It is normal to feel slower. I remember one meeting clearly. My manager asked for opinions on a new project strategy. I had an idea. A good one. But I hesitated. Someone else spoke first. The moment passed. After the meeting, I felt frustrated with myself. Not because my English was terrible, but because fear was louder than my voice. Outside of work, cultural differences continued to surprise me. In America, small talk is a social skill. People talk about the weather, sports, weekend plans, even with strangers. On the subway, in elevators, at coffee shops. At first, I found it exhausting. Why talk about weather when it changes tomorrow? But I began to see something deeper. Small talk builds comfort. It creates low-pressure opportunities to practice English. It teaches rhythm and tone. When my future husband and I first spoke on the subway, our conversation was simple. We talked about the cold weather and commuting. Yet that small exchange opened the door to something meaningful. The United States is also a country shaped by regional differences. The climate, lifestyle, and even communication style vary from state to state. In the Northeast, life moves fast. In the South, conversations may last longer. In the West, innovation and flexibility shape workplace culture. Understanding these differences helped me realize something important. Struggling was not a personal failure. It was adaptation. Adaptation takes time. I began creating small daily systems to improve my English and adjust emotionally. Every morning, during my commute, I listened to authentic American English podcasts, interviews, even subway announcements. Instead of translating every word, I focused on intonation. Research in language learning shows that prosody, the rhythm and melody of speech, is critical for listening comprehension. When you train your ears to recognize patterns, understanding becomes automatic over time. In the evenings, I practiced speaking out loud. Sometimes I repeated sentences I heard during the day. Sometimes I summarized my work tasks in English. Speaking alone in my apartment felt strange at first. But repetition builds neural pathways. The brain changes physically when exposed to consistent language input. This process is called neuroplasticity. You are not just learning English. You are rewiring your brain. Emotionally, I also had to shift my mindset. Instead of asking, "Why am I not fluent yet?" I started asking, "What did I understand better today than yesterday?" Progress became measurable in small wins. Meanwhile, the man from the subway and I continued seeing each other casually. Coffee turned into lunch. Lunch turned into long walks through the city. He was patient when I searched for words. He never interrupted my sentences. When I mispronounced something, he gently repeated it naturally, not as correction, but as conversation. That subtle modeling helped me more than formal lessons. Through him, I learned more about American culture, family traditions, holiday gatherings, the importance of independence. In many American households, children are encouraged to express opinions early. Open communication is valued. That cultural emphasis on speaking confidently influenced how I saw my own voice. Still, not every day felt inspiring. Some evenings, after a long workday, I felt tired of thinking in two languages. Living in the United States as an immigrant means constantly balancing identities. At home, I was one version of myself. At work, another. That emotional tension is real. But slowly, the unfamiliar became familiar. The subway routes felt easier. The grocery store layouts made sense. The winter air felt less hostile. And something else changed. I stopped introducing myself in my mind as a foreigner trying to survive in America. I began seeing myself as a woman building a life in the United States. That identity shift mattered. If you are learning English while living abroad, or preparing to move, remember this: feeling like a stranger is part of the process. Climate differences, cultural adjustments, workplace communication styles, they all challenge you. But they also stretch you. Growth rarely feels comfortable. Back then, I did not yet know how deeply my life would connect with that man from the subway. I did not know how many cultural lessons, language mistakes, and emotional breakthroughs were ahead. All I knew was this: I was still here. Still showing up. Still listening. Still speaking. And sometimes, staying is the bravest decision you can make. The subway moment that changed everything. You never expect your life to change between two subway stops. You expect delays. You expect noise. You expect strangers who never look up from their phones. What you do not expect is to meet your future husband while holding a reusable coffee cup and pretending to understand a podcast in fast American English. But that is exactly how my love story in the United States truly began. After that first simple exchange, "Is this seat taken?" we started seeing each other more often. At first, it felt coincidental. We happened to take the same subway line. We happened to get off at the same stop. We happened to work in nearby buildings. Coincidence is a comfortable explanation. It feels safer than destiny. Still, I kept asking myself quietly, can destiny be accidental? In the beginning, our conversations stayed simple. We talked about work. About winter weather. About how confusing public transportation can be in a big American city. I deliberately kept my sentences short. I chose clarity over complexity. Instead of trying to impress him with advanced vocabulary, I focused on being understood. And here is something powerful about language learning. Simplicity builds confidence. Linguistic research shows that high-frequency vocabulary accounts for most daily communication. In other words, you do not need thousands of rare words to connect with someone. You need the right common words, spoken clearly. He never seemed impatient. When I paused to search for a word, he waited. When I mispronounced something, he did not correct me directly. He simply responded naturally, modeling the correct pronunciation in context. That kind of subtle feedback is incredibly effective. Studies in second language acquisition suggest that implicit correction, when the correct form is repeated naturally, helps learners improve without increasing anxiety. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after we first met, the subway stopped between stations for several minutes. The lights flickered slightly. People sighed. Some checked their watches. I felt the familiar anxiety of silence. And then he asked me something unexpected. "What made you move to the United States?" That question felt bigger than small talk. It invited vulnerability. I explained that I wanted growth. That I wanted to challenge myself. That I believed living and working in America would push me beyond my comfort zone. My grammar was not perfect. I paused often. But I spoke honestly. He listened carefully. Not just to my words, but to my meaning. In that moment, I realized something important about communication. Fluency is not speed. Fluency is connection. When the message is real, people lean in. They do not measure your verb tenses. As our subway conversations continued over the following weeks, something shifted inside me again. English stopped feeling like a performance. It became a tool for intimacy. We began meeting outside the subway. Coffee after work. Short walks through the city on weekends. He introduced me to small local bookstores. I introduced him to food from my culture. Cultural exchange became part of our relationship. Love, I learned, grows in shared curiosity. At the same time, I was still adjusting to American workplace culture and regional climate. Winter in the Northeast was intense. Snowstorms changed schedules. Offices closed unexpectedly. Life adapted quickly. That flexibility taught me something about Americans. Resilience is normal here. People adjust fast. They complain briefly, then move on. I started adopting that mindset in my English learning. Instead of replaying mistakes in my head for hours, I began treating them like snowstorms. Temporary. Inconvenient. Not permanent. There is also a psychological principle called the growth mindset, introduced by psychologist Carol Dweck. It suggests that when you see abilities as developable rather than fixed, you persist longer. Meeting him during that vulnerable phase of my life reinforced this mindset. He never saw my English as a limitation. He saw it as a process. One evening, while we were walking after dinner, I confessed something I had not told many people. I almost gave up on living here, I said. Sometimes I feel like I don't belong. He stopped walking, looked at me seriously, and replied, "You belong anywhere you decide to build." That sentence stayed with me. Belonging is not automatic. It is constructed through effort, through language, through relationships. As weeks turned into months, our story moved beyond coincidence. We learned about each other's families, about childhood memories, about values. In American culture, independence is highly valued, but so is partnership. I began to see how relationships here are often built on direct communication. If something feels wrong, you say it. If something feels good, you say it too. That directness helped me grow emotionally and linguistically. Instead of hiding confusion, I started asking, "Can you explain that again?" Instead of pretending to understand, I chose clarity. That small behavioral shift changed everything. Looking back, the subway was not just a location. It was a symbol. A moving space between destinations. A place where strangers sit side by side without knowing their futures are about to intersect. If I had stayed silent that first morning, our story might not exist. If fear had won, destiny would have remained invisible. So when people ask me, "How did you meet your husband in the United States?" I smile. On the subway. But the real answer is deeper. I met him at the exact moment I decided not to let fear control my voice. And sometimes, that is how destiny quietly begins. Can destiny be accidental? There is a strange moment in every love story when you stop asking, "How did we meet?" and start asking, "Why did we meet?" That question followed me for months after the subway. Not in a dramatic movie-style way. More quietly. More persistently. Can destiny be accidental? Living and working in the United States had already felt like a series of calculated decisions. I chose to apply for jobs. I chose to accept an offer. I chose to move across the world. None of that was accidental. It was ambition. It was planning. It was courage mixed with fear. But meeting him? That felt random. Or was it? Psychology tells us that humans are natural pattern seekers. Our brains are wired to connect dots, even when the dots are far apart. This tendency is called apophenia, the experience of seeing meaningful connections in random events. When something good happens unexpectedly, we want it to mean something. After we had been seeing each other for a few months, I replayed that first subway conversation in my head more times than I can count. What if I had overslept that morning? What if I had chosen a different subway car? What if I had kept my headphones in and ignored him? Small choices. Big consequences. But here is what I began to understand. Destiny is not magic. Destiny is direction plus decision. The United States is a country built on movement. People move for opportunity, for education, for love, for reinvention. In that sense, everyone here is navigating between chance and choice. Climate varies by region. Culture shifts by state. Policies shape family structures, career paths, and immigration journeys. Yet within all of that structure, individuals still make daily decisions that shape their lives. When I moved to America, I was focused on career growth and improving my English skills. I followed a system. Morning listening practice. Workplace observation. Evening speaking exercises. I tracked my progress like a student preparing for a B1 to C2 masterclass in real life. None of that felt romantic. But meeting him introduced something new, emotional risk. In American dating culture, communication is usually direct. If someone is interested, they say it. If they are not, they also say it. That clarity felt refreshing and terrifying. Back home, signals were sometimes subtle. In the U.S., conversations about expectations happen earlier. One evening, after dinner, he asked me plainly, "What are you looking for?" Such a simple question, but emotionally powerful. At that moment, I had two choices. I could protect myself, or I could be honest. "I'm not here for something temporary," I said. "If I build something, I want it to last." My grammar was not poetic. My vocabulary was not advanced. But my meaning was clear. And clarity is powerful. Communication researchers often emphasize that meaning carries more weight than linguistic perfection. In long-term relationships, emotional transparency predicts stability more than eloquence. In other words, destiny favors honesty. As our relationship deepened, I began noticing how environment shapes personality. The fast pace of life in the Northeast influenced how we planned our time. Work schedules were demanding. Winters were intense. Snowstorms interrupted plans. Yet resilience became normal. You adjust. You reschedule. You move forward. That mindset influenced how I viewed destiny. Instead of imagining fate as something fixed, I started seeing it as flexible. Destiny is not a straight line. It is a moving train. You can choose to get on. You can choose to stay seated. You can choose to get off. Our story continued to evolve. We met each other's friends. I met his family during the holidays. American family gatherings surprised me. Open discussions around the dinner table. Everyone sharing opinions freely. Laughter mixed with debate. It was different from my upbringing, but it felt alive. Through those experiences, I saw how love in the United States is often built on partnership, not dependency. Two independent individuals choosing to build together. Still, there were moments of doubt. Immigration paperwork. Career pressure. Cultural misunderstandings. There were days when I wondered if love was enough to bridge all differences. On those days, the question returned, can destiny be accidental? Over time, my answer changed. Maybe destiny is not about the moment you meet. Maybe it is about what you do after meeting. Research in behavioral psychology suggests that consistent small actions create long-term identity shifts. If you choose to show up repeatedly, to communicate, to adapt, to improve, you shape your own path. Destiny becomes the result of disciplined choices. The subway was an accident. Saying yes to coffee was a decision. Continuing to show up was commitment. If you are learning English, building a life abroad, or navigating love across cultures, remember this: chance opens doors, but courage walks through them. I used to think destiny would feel dramatic, fireworks, certainty, absolute clarity. Instead, it felt quiet. A conversation. A second meeting. A third. Love did not erase my fear of speaking English. It softened it. It gave me a reason to practice, to explain, to express. And maybe that is the real answer. Destiny is not an accident. It is a series of brave responses to unexpected questions. Like on a subway. Like in a new country. Like in a language that once terrified you. You do not need perfect conditions for destiny to begin. You need willingness. And sometimes, willingness is louder than fate. Climate, career, and character. If you want to understand a person in the United States, look at the weather where they grew up. That sounds dramatic, but stay with me. Climate shapes routine. Routine shapes mindset. And mindset shapes relationships. When I first moved to the Northeast to live and work in America, I thought winter was just a season. I quickly learned it was a lifestyle. Snowstorms did not politely reschedule themselves. They interrupted meetings. They delayed trains. They forced you to plan ahead. You check weather apps the way some people check social media. Growing up in a warmer climate, I was used to flexibility. If it rained, you waited. If it was hot, you slowed down. But in the northeastern United States, winter demands structure. You prepare boots before the storm. You stock groceries. You leave earlier for work. People adapt fast. And that adaptation changes personality. My future husband grew up in this climate. For him, harsh winters were normal. Delays were temporary. Obstacles were logistical, not emotional. When the subway stopped because of heavy snow, he shrugged. It happens, he would say. I, on the other hand, reacted emotionally at first. I felt frustrated. I worried about being late. I worried about performance at work. Small disruptions felt bigger to me because I was already navigating a new language and culture. That contrast revealed something important. Environment influences stress tolerance. Research in behavioral psychology shows that repeated exposure to manageable stress increases resilience. People raised in demanding climates often develop practical coping strategies early. Watching how he responded to weather, work pressure, and daily inconvenience taught me something subtle but powerful. Calm is learned. Work culture added another layer. Living and working in the United States means adjusting to professional expectations that may differ from your home country. In my office, punctuality was strict. Communication was direct. Feedback was honest and immediate. At first, this directness felt sharp. When my manager said, "This needs improvement," my brain translated it as personal criticism. But over time, I realized that American workplace culture often separates performance from identity. Feedback is about the task, not your worth. That distinction changed how I handled both career and relationship conversations. In our early months of dating, we sometimes disagreed. About time management. About cultural habits. About how much planning is necessary for the future. But he approached disagreements the same way he approached work challenges, directly, calmly, without drama. One evening, after I overanalyzed a small misunderstanding, he smiled and said, "It's not a crisis. It's a conversation." That sentence stayed with me. Climate had trained him to see obstacles as temporary. Workplace culture had trained him to address issues directly. I was learning both at the same time, in English. There is also something interesting about how regional culture in the United States influences social behavior. In fast-paced cities, efficiency is valued. People walk quickly. Conversations are concise. Time feels precious. That rhythm affected our relationship too. We scheduled dates around demanding work hours. We planned weekends carefully. We respected each other's independence. For me, adapting to that pace required emotional adjustment. In the beginning, I sometimes interpreted independence as distance. But in American culture, independence is often a sign of respect. Giving someone space means trusting them. Learning this helped me avoid unnecessary insecurity. Meanwhile, my English continued to improve, not because I memorized thousands of new words, but because I used the language daily in real situations. Climate discussions became vocabulary lessons. Words like forecast, commute, deadline, and efficiency became part of my active language, not just textbook terms. Linguists emphasize the importance of contextual learning. When vocabulary connects to lived experience, retention increases dramatically. Talking about snowstorms while actually standing in one makes the word unforgettable. But not every day felt productive. There were weeks when work pressure was high, when winter felt endless, when cultural differences felt exhausting. During those times, I noticed something about relationships under stress. Shared challenge builds intimacy. Psychological studies show that couples who navigate moderate stress together often report stronger emotional bonds. Facing difficulties as a team increases trust. When trains were delayed, we laughed about it. When work was intense, we encouraged each other. When I struggled to express something in English, he waited. Climate, career, and character became interconnected. The more I observed him, the more I realized that stability is not about perfect circumstances. It is about consistent behavior. Showing up. Communicating clearly. Adjusting without panic. Living in America taught me that external conditions will always change. Weather shifts. Job roles evolve. Policies update. But internal response, that is where growth happens. If you are learning English while building a life abroad, understand this: your environment will challenge you. Climate may feel harsh. Workplace expectations may feel intense. Cultural differences may feel confusing. But those pressures are not barriers. They are training. Just as winter strengthens resilience, daily English conversations strengthen fluency. Just as direct feedback improves performance, honest communication strengthens relationships. Looking back, I see how the climate of the Northeast shaped both of us. It shaped how he handled stress. It shaped how I learned to adapt. And together, it shaped our love story. Because sometimes, destiny is not only about meeting the right person. It is about growing strong enough to stand beside them, even in the coldest season. American dating and marriage culture. If you think love is universal, you are right. But if you think love looks the same everywhere, you are completely wrong. Dating in the United States surprised me more than the winter weather, more than the workplace culture, even more than the speed of subway trains. Because in America, relationships often move with clarity. Sometimes that clarity feels refreshing. Sometimes it feels terrifying. When my future husband and I started seeing each other more seriously, I realized quickly that American dating culture values communication early. There is no long guessing game. At some point, someone asks, "What are we?" And the question is not dramatic. It is practical. Back home, relationship definitions sometimes grow slowly without formal conversations. In the U.S., defining the relationship is common. It creates emotional alignment. At first, I found that directness intimidating. My English was still improving. Expressing complex feelings in a second language felt risky. But here is something powerful about speaking honestly in English, even imperfectly. Vulnerability builds connection faster than perfect grammar ever could. One evening, we were sitting in a small cafe after work. He looked at me calmly and asked, "Are you comfortable with where this is going?" Such a simple sentence, yet emotionally loaded. My brain immediately began translating possible responses. I wanted to sound intelligent, mature, clear. But I reminded myself of something I had learned through practicing listening and speaking English daily. Clarity is more important than complexity. "I don't want something temporary," I said slowly. "If I invest my time and heart, I want it to be real." The sentence was simple. The meaning was strong. American relationship culture often emphasizes partnership. Two independent adults choosing to build something together. Independence is not seen as emotional distance. It is seen as stability. Each person maintains their own career, friendships, and goals, while also creating shared plans. That idea changed my perspective on love in the United States. Living and working in America means balancing ambition and intimacy. Work hours can be long. Career goals are often prioritized. Financial independence is valued highly. So couples must intentionally create time together. Nothing happens automatically. We began planning intentionally. Weekly dinners. Weekend walks. Honest check-ins about stress from work. This intentionality felt structured, but also secure. Then came a bigger step, meeting families. In American culture, family introductions can happen earlier than I expected. Holiday gatherings are important: Thanksgiving, Christmas, summer barbecues. These events are more than meals. They are social rituals. The first time I met his family, I was nervous, not only emotionally, but linguistically. Fast group conversations are challenging for any English learner. Multiple voices. Overlapping jokes. Cultural references. But something interesting happened. When people see effort, they respond with warmth. I asked questions. I listened carefully. I smiled when I did not understand everything, and sometimes I said, "Can you explain that?" Instead of embarrassment, I received patience. From a psychological perspective, openness invites inclusion. Social belonging increases when individuals demonstrate genuine curiosity. Language mistakes did not reduce connection. Silence would have. At the same time, I learned about legal and practical aspects of marriage in the United States. Marriage is not only romantic, it is administrative. There are documents, policies, tax implications, health insurance considerations, immigration paperwork. Discussing these topics required clear communication. We talked about finances openly. In many American relationships, financial transparency is considered essential. Budgeting, saving, and planning for the future are shared responsibilities. I appreciated this structure. It reduced uncertainty. But I would be dishonest if I said I never felt overwhelmed. Planning a life together in a country where you are not originally from brings unique stress. Immigration policies change. Visa categories shift. Processing times vary. These external factors influence emotional stability. During one particularly stressful paperwork phase, I felt anxious again, the old fear returning. What if something goes wrong? What if I cannot stay? What if this dream collapses? He looked at me and said something simple but grounding: we handle what comes. Together. That word, together, changed the tone of my anxiety. Research in relationship psychology shows that couples who frame challenges as shared problems rather than individual burdens report higher long-term satisfaction. Language matters. Saying our problem instead of your problem strengthens unity. As we moved closer to marriage, conversations became deeper. We discussed children, cultural traditions, where we wanted to live long-term. The Northeast? Another state? A warmer climate? Cultural blending became part of our vision. We agreed that if we built a family in the United States, our home would reflect both of our backgrounds. Food, holidays, language exposure, everything would be shared. Through all of this, my English improved naturally. Not because I memorized complex vocabulary, but because I used English for real emotional discussions. Studies in applied linguistics suggest that emotional engagement enhances language retention. When you speak about topics that matter deeply, your brain encodes those structures more strongly. Eventually, he proposed. Not in a dramatic movie scene. No fireworks. Just a quiet, meaningful moment. Honest. Direct. Clear. In that moment, I understood something fully. American dating culture had pushed me toward clarity. Marriage required courage. Not perfect English. Not perfect certainty. But courage to build. Love in the United States is not accidental. It is intentional. Structured. Discussed. Planned. And I realized that destiny is not only about meeting someone on a subway. It is about choosing them, clearly and repeatedly, in a language that once scared you, and now carries your future. Marriage is not the ending, it's the real beginning. If you've ever watched a romantic movie in the United States, you know how it usually ends. A wedding scene, soft music, smiling guests, and then credits roll. But real life is not a Hollywood script. Marriage is not the finish line. It is the starting point. When we officially got married in the United States, the paperwork felt surprisingly small compared to the emotional weight of that decision. A legal signature. A ceremony with close friends. A simple celebration. No dramatic scene like in The Notebook. Just two people standing in front of witnesses, promising consistency more than perfection. And that is when reality truly began. Living together as husband and wife while both working full-time in America requires more than love. It requires discipline, adaptability, and emotional maturity. U.S. marriage culture often emphasizes partnership over hierarchy. Decisions are discussed. Responsibilities are negotiated. Expectations are clarified. The first few months after marriage were not dramatic, they were detailed. Who handles groceries? Who cooks when both of us come home exhausted? How do we divide finances? How much should we save each month? These conversations may sound unromantic, but they build stability. In the U.S., financial transparency is strongly connected to marital satisfaction. We created shared budgets, discussed credit scores, talked about long-term investments. We did not avoid practical topics. At the same time, we had to adjust emotionally. Marriage changed the tone of our arguments. Before, disagreements felt optional. After marriage, conflict required resolution. Walking away emotionally was no longer an easy option. Commitment transforms conflict into responsibility. One evening, after a long workday, I felt overwhelmed. Immigration paperwork, work deadlines, cultural adjustments, everything felt heavy. I said something impulsive in frustration. Instead of reacting defensively, he paused and asked, "Are you stressed about work or about us?" That question shifted everything. In American communication culture, direct clarification prevents escalation. Instead of assuming meaning, people often ask for it. I began to understand that mature marriage requires curiosity before criticism. Living and working in the United States as an immigrant wife brings unique pressure. You constantly calculate career progress, visa security, professional growth, social integration. There is a quiet fear that if you slow down, you may fall behind. But marriage taught me something powerful. Your partner is not your competitor. He is your teammate. We started weekly check-ins, not formal meetings, but intentional conversations. On Sunday evenings, we would ask each other 3 simple questions. What felt difficult this week? What felt good? How can I support you better next week? This small ritual created emotional safety. Research in relationship psychology shows that structured communication reduces long-term resentment. It is not about talking more. It is about talking intentionally. There were cultural adjustments too. In the United States, individual space is highly valued even within marriage. Having personal time is not seen as rejection. It is seen as healthy independence. At first, I misunderstood this. If you wanted time alone to exercise or read, I questioned whether something was wrong. Over time, I realized independence strengthens connection. 2 emotionally stable individuals choose each other more freely. Language also evolved inside our marriage. My English became more natural, less rehearsed, more spontaneous. Marriage forces real-time communication. There is no script. No time to mentally translate every sentence. Emotional honesty accelerates fluency. Sometimes we laugh about our early conversations. I once confused upset and set up, creating a completely different meaning. We still joke about it. Humor reduces tension, and shared humor strengthens bonds. Work-life balance became another challenge. American work culture can be intense. Long hours, career ambition, performance expectations. Protecting our relationship required boundaries. We established a simple rule: no work emails during dinner. That small habit protected daily connection. Then came a bigger test: uncertainty about relocation. We discussed whether to stay in our current state or move for better career opportunities. Moving in America is common. Mobility is part of the culture. But relocation means rebuilding community from zero. I was afraid. New city. New job. New neighbors. Again. He asked, "Are you afraid of the move or afraid of starting over?" That distinction mattered. Marriage does not remove fear. It reframes it. We eventually decided to stay, at least for now. Stability mattered more than speed. Marriage taught me that progress does not always mean movement. Sometimes it means strengthening roots. Social life also shifted. In American culture, married couples often build friendships with other couples. Weekend dinners, shared trips, community events. Creating a support network is intentional. At one small gathering, someone asked me, "Do you feel at home here now?" I paused before answering. Home used to mean geography. Now it means partnership. Marriage in the United States is not a fairy tale. It is a daily decision. Choosing patience when tired. Choosing respect during disagreement. Choosing transparency over pride. And here is something important for anyone learning English while building a life abroad. Fluency is not only linguistic. It is relational. You learn to express needs clearly. To apologize sincerely. To ask questions directly. These skills strengthen both language and marriage. Looking back at the moment we met on that subway, I see innocence. But marriage required courage. Destiny may introduce two people. Commitment builds the life that follows. And I realized something quietly powerful. Love in America is not loud. It is consistent. Not dramatic. Deliberate. Not accidental. Intentional. Marriage did not complete our story. It began the real one. When marriage meets reality, career pressure, identity, and staying soft in a hard season. If Part 7 was about learning how to build a marriage, Part 8 is about what happens when life tests it. Because here's the truth no one puts in a YouTube thumbnail. The real challenge doesn't come from romance. It comes from pressure. Living and working in the United States as a married immigrant woman means constantly balancing three identities: professional, partner, person becoming someone new. And sometimes, those identities collide. About a year into our marriage, my career entered a demanding phase. Deadlines became tighter. Expectations grew higher. I wanted to prove I deserved my position. In American work culture, performance is visible. You are measured, evaluated, ranked. At the same time, immigration policies were shifting nationally. News headlines created anxiety. Even when your personal case is stable, uncertainty in the system creates emotional tension. I began carrying stress home. Not intentionally. Not dramatically. But subtly. Shorter patience. Less laughter. More overthinking. One night after dinner, my husband said gently, "You're here, but you're not really here." That sentence hurt, because it was true. Marriage in the U.S. emphasizes emotional presence. Being physically together is not enough. Connection requires attention. And attention is hard when your mind is running through emails, performance reviews, or visa timelines. I realized something uncomfortable. I was fighting external pressure by becoming emotionally distant internally. And distance is dangerous in any relationship. We had to recalibrate. Instead of ignoring stress, we started naming it clearly. I would say, "Today I felt insecure at work," instead of saying, "I'm tired." Specific language creates specific understanding. Psychologically, labeling emotions reduces their intensity. Linguistically, describing real feelings improves fluency. Again, my English improved not from textbooks, but from honesty. Around this time, we revisited our long-term goals. Did we both want to stay in this industry? Did we want to start a business one day? What did success really mean in America for us? In U.S. culture, ambition is normalized. But marriage forces you to define ambition as a couple. 2 careers. 1 life. Alignment matters. We had difficult conversations about sacrifice. If one of us received a major opportunity in another state, would the other follow? How do you choose between personal growth and shared stability? These discussions were not hypothetical. They felt real. At one point, I considered applying for a role in another city, a stronger title, higher salary. But relocation would mean starting socially from zero again. I asked him, "Would you move for me?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked, "Would you feel proud there, or just accomplished?" That question changed the evaluation. American culture often celebrates achievement. But marriage requires emotional sustainability. We realized that growth without emotional grounding is fragile. So we decided something radical in a competitive environment. Peace mattered more than prestige. Another challenge during this season was identity. When you live long enough in a new country, something shifts. You are no longer fully who you were, but you are not fully American either. At a networking event, someone asked where I was from. I answered automatically. Then they said, "Oh, your English is really good." It was meant as a compliment. But it triggered something inside me. After years of working, living, marrying here, was I still seen as temporary? I came home quieter than usual. My husband noticed immediately. Instead of dismissing it, he listened. No fixing. No advising. Just listening. Marriage in the United States often encourages emotional validation. Not every feeling needs correction. Sometimes it needs acknowledgement. That night, I understood something deeply. Belonging is not granted by a passport. It is created in daily intimacy. Inside our home, I was not foreign. I was a partner. A builder of shared plans. A decision maker. And that security strengthened me externally. We also began protecting our marriage from comparison. Social media can distort reality. Perfect couples. Perfect homes. Perfect careers. In a city environment especially, comparison is constant. We made a conscious decision, no discussing other couples' timelines as benchmarks. No racing toward milestones because everyone else is. Marriage is not a competition. It is collaboration. To reconnect emotionally, we started small traditions again, subway rides on weekends, revisiting the station where we first met. It reminded us that destiny may have introduced us accidentally, but staying requires effort. On one of those rides, sitting across from each other like strangers again, he smiled and said, "If I met you now, I'd still choose you." There was no drama. Just certainty. And that certainty felt stronger than romance. Looking back, part 8 of our story is not about crisis. It is about recalibration. When career pressure rises. When identity feels blurred. When immigration uncertainty whispers fear. Marriage becomes less about passion and more about steadiness. If you are building a life in the United States, working hard, learning English, adapting culturally, remember this. You do not have to become harder to survive. You can stay soft. You can stay honest. You can ask for support. And the right partner will not see your vulnerability as weakness, but as trust. Destiny may feel accidental on a subway platform. But resilience in marriage? That is chosen. Every day. When we almost broke, conflict, silence, and choosing each other again. If you've followed this journey from meeting on a subway to building a marriage in the United States, you might think the hardest part was immigration paperwork or career pressure. It wasn't. The hardest season was silence. Not dramatic fighting. Not betrayal. Not a major external crisis. Just emotional distance that grew quietly between two busy adults trying to succeed in America. About 2 years into our marriage, work intensified for both of us. Promotions. New responsibilities. Longer hours. In U.S. professional culture, growth often comes with invisible costs: sleep, social time, emotional energy. We were both doing well. On paper. But at home, something subtle shifted. Conversations became logistical. Did you pay the bill? What time is your meeting? Are we free Saturday? Efficient. Functional. Empty. In American marriage culture, communication is often praised as the key to success. But no one talks enough about emotional maintenance. You can communicate constantly and still not connect. One night, after a long week, we sat in the living room scrolling on our phones. Same couch. Separate worlds. I suddenly felt lonely while sitting next to my husband. That feeling scared me more than any argument ever had. I asked quietly, "Are we okay?" He looked surprised. Of course we are. But I wasn't asking about stability. I was asking about closeness. Living and working in the United States can create a performance mindset. You optimize. You schedule. You maximize productivity. And sometimes you accidentally apply that efficiency to love. But intimacy cannot be optimized. It must be nurtured. We didn't explode into conflict. Instead, we drifted. And drifting is dangerous because it feels calm. A few weeks later, we had our first real argument in months. Not about money, not about immigration, not about career. About attention. You don't really see me lately, I said. I'm exhausted, he replied. So am I answered. That moment could have escalated. Instead, something important happened. We stopped defending and started listening. American relationship psychology often emphasizes repair attempts, small gestures that interrupt conflict before it becomes damage. A softer tone. A question instead of an accusation. A pause. He said, "Help me understand what you're missing." That sentence opened the door. I didn't need grand gestures. I needed presence. Eye contact. Undistracted conversations. Shared laughter. He admitted he felt pressure too, to provide, to succeed, to be stable in a country where financial security matters deeply. For the first time in months, we talked without multitasking. And here's something I learned as someone who trained her ears to think in English. Emotional vocabulary matters. Saying I feel disconnected is different from saying you don't care. One invites dialogue. The other invites defense. We made a decision that felt simple but powerful. Protect us the way we protect our careers. We scheduled date nights, not expensive dinners, just intentional time. Phones away. Questions beyond logistics. One night, over takeout at our kitchen table, I asked, if we met today on that same subway, would we notice each other? He smiled. Yes. But I'd probably talk to you faster this time. We laughed. And laughter broke the tension. Another layer of conflict surfaced during this period: cultural expectations of emotional expression. In some cultures, endurance is strength. You don't complain. You handle it. But in American marriage culture, unspoken resentment can quietly erode connection. So we practiced something uncomfortable, saying small frustrations before they became large ones. I felt dismissed earlier. I need reassurance. I'm overwhelmed. These sentences felt vulnerable. But vulnerability rebuilt intimacy. There was also fear beneath the surface. Fear that success might pull us in different directions. Fear that independence could become isolation. Fear that ambition could replace affection. Living in the United States rewards independence. But marriage requires interdependence, two strong individuals choosing mutual reliance. We started revisiting our shared vision. Why did we get married? What kind of life did we want long-term? Stability? Adventure? Children? Community? Revisiting purpose realigned us. During one difficult week, I asked him honestly, have you ever thought about giving up? He paused, not because he was unsure, but because he respected the weight of the question. No, he said. But I've thought about how easy it would be to stop trying. That honesty was painful and healing. Marriage does not fail in one dramatic moment. It weakens when effort becomes optional. So we chose effort again. We reintroduced our Sunday check-ins. We brought back subway rides on weekends. We protected dinner time. We apologized faster. Something shifted. Not fireworks. Not a cinematic breakthrough. Just steady reconnection. I realized that destiny may introduce two people, but staying in love in America, in a fast-paced, career-driven, independent culture, requires intentional slowing down. Silence almost separated us. Conversation brought us back. And here's the deeper truth. Conflict is not proof of incompatibility. Silence is not peace. Effort is not weakness. If you are building a life, career, and marriage in the United States, especially as someone navigating language, culture, and identity, remember this. You will change. Your partner will change. Your love must evolve too. We didn't almost break because we stopped loving each other. We almost broke because we stopped prioritizing each other. And once we saw that clearly, the choice became simple again. Choose. Again. Every day. Redefining the American dream, love, stability, and what success really means. When I first came to the United States, I thought the American dream was simple: work hard, build a career, earn stability, and everything else would follow. Then I met my husband on the subway. And over the years, through dating, marriage, conflict, silence, reconnection, I realized something deeper. The American dream is not about achievement. It's about alignment. Part 10 of our journey is not dramatic. There is no major crisis. No breaking point. No big immigration scare. Instead, this chapter is about clarity. The kind that comes quietly after you survive your hardest seasons. After we rebuilt emotional connection in Part 9, something shifted in our mindset. We stopped asking, "How do we succeed?" and started asking, "What does success mean for us?" Living and working in the U.S. exposes you to constant comparison. Promotions, salaries, real estate, investments, social media announcements, engagements, babies, relocations, new titles. It never stops. In American culture, growth is visible, measurable, public. But marriage taught us to define success privately. One evening, sitting in our apartment after a long week, we had a conversation that felt ordinary, but changed everything. If nothing else changed, he asked, "Would you still feel proud of the life we're building?" I paused. We didn't own a house yet. We weren't at the highest levels of our careers. We didn't have everything figured out. But we had stability, emotional safety, mutual respect. Yes, I said. I would. That moment redefined ambition for me. When you move to America, especially as an immigrant, there's an internal pressure to maximize opportunity. You feel grateful, and that gratitude sometimes turns into overworking, overproving, overachieving. But constantly chasing more can quietly erode what you already have. We began designing our life more intentionally. Instead of automatically saying yes to every opportunity, we started evaluating decisions through 3 filters. Does this strengthen us financially? Does this support our emotional health? Does this align with our long-term vision? If something passed only one filter but failed the others, we reconsidered. This mindset shift felt radical in a high-performance culture. We also started talking about home ownership, a major symbol of the American dream. Buying a house in the U.S. is both financial and emotional. Mortgages, credit history, interest rates, location strategy. The conversation wasn't just about square footage. It was about roots. Are we choosing a house, I asked him, or are we choosing a life? Because in America, mobility is easy. People move for jobs constantly. But marriage sometimes needs geographic stability. We decided not to rush. Another important shift during this season was how we viewed language and identity. Years ago, I focused on sounding fluent, professional, polished. Now, I focused on being authentic. I no longer translated every sentence in my head before speaking. I no longer feared minor mistakes. My English had evolved through real conversations, arguments, love, stress, forgiveness. Fluency became emotional, not just grammatical. At a work event, someone once asked how long I had been in the United States. When I answered, they said, "You've adapted so well." I smiled. Adaptation used to mean survival. Now it meant integration, without erasing who I was before. Marriage strengthened that identity balance. Inside our relationship, my background wasn't something to hide or minimize. It was something woven into our shared future, food traditions, language exposure, cultural stories. We weren't building a perfect American life. We were building our version of it. There were still pressures, of course. Friends buying homes. Colleagues relocating for major promotions. Social media milestones. Comparison never disappears completely. But something inside us had stabilized. One Saturday morning, we took the subway again, not because we had to, but because we wanted to revisit where it all started. Sitting across from each other like strangers years ago, we couldn't have predicted this version of ourselves. Not the conflicts. Not the recalibrations. Not the clarity. Do you think it was destiny? I asked him. He thought for a moment. I think meeting was chance, he said. Building this was choice. That sentence summarizes everything. The American dream is often marketed as upward movement. Higher salary. Bigger home. Faster progress. But in marriage, upward movement without emotional grounding feels empty. So we chose grounding. We prioritized mental health. We protected time together. We saved consistently but lived presently. We invested in experiences, not just assets. Success became quieter, but deeper. If you are building your own life in the United States, especially navigating love, career, and cultural identity, Here's what I've learned. You are allowed to define success differently. You are allowed to slow down. You are allowed to protect your marriage from external noise. Destiny may introduce you on a subway, but fulfillment comes from alignment. Not perfection. Not comparison. Not constant acceleration. Alignment. And when I look at our life now, imperfect, evolving, intentional, I realize something powerful. The American dream isn't something you arrive at. It's something you co-create. Together. Identity, belonging, and the question I couldn't avoid, where is home now? If you've stayed with me through this journey, from meeting my husband on a subway to redefining the American dream, then you already know something important. Love can survive pressure. Marriage can survive conflict. But identity? Identity is more complicated. Part 11 is about a question that quietly followed me for years while living and working in the United States. Where is home now? At first, the answer felt obvious. Home was where I was born, where my family lived, where my first language carried emotion without effort. But as years passed, career growth, marriage stability, cultural integration, the answer became less clear. Because home started to feel divided. In the U.S., I built a professional reputation. I gained confidence speaking English in meetings. I navigated systems independently, taxes, insurance, banking, long-term planning. I built friendships. I became someone new. And yet, when I visited my home country, something had shifted there too. I wasn't exactly the same person anymore. This in-between space is rarely discussed openly in conversations about immigration and marriage. But it's real. At a family gathering back home, someone joked, "You're American now." They meant it playfully. But it stayed with me. Was I? Back in the United States, at a social event, someone asked, "Do you ever think about going back for good?" That question also stayed with me. Because the truth is, I didn't know. One evening, after returning from a trip to visit family, I sat quietly in our apartment. My husband noticed the shift in my mood. "You seem far away," he said gently. "I feel like I don't fully belong anywhere," I admitted. That was the first time I said it out loud. Living as an immigrant in America often comes with gratitude, and gratitude can silence confusion. You feel lucky to have opportunities. You feel responsible to succeed. You don't want to complain. But belonging is not solved by opportunity alone. Marriage complicated this identity question further. If we ever moved abroad, would he adapt the way I did? If we stayed permanently in the U.S., would part of me always feel divided? If we raised children, what culture would feel natural to them? These were not urgent decisions. but they were emotional realities. American culture celebrates reinvention. You can start over. Redefine yourself. Build a new version of your life. But reinvention has a cost. You lose familiarity. One night, I asked him directly, if I ever wanted to live closer to my family again, would you consider it? He didn't answer immediately. Not because he was resistant, but because he respected the weight of the question. Yes, he said finally. Not because I'd understand it fully, but because I'd understand that it matters to you. That answer didn't solve the question, but it softened the fear. Belonging, I began to realize, is less about geography and more about emotional safety. Inside our marriage, I was not required to choose between identities. I didn't have to erase where I came from to justify where I live now. We started creating small rituals that honored both cultures. Cooking dishes from my childhood. Celebrating holidays from both backgrounds. Introducing phrases from my first language into our daily conversations. Cultural blending became intentional. At work, I stopped trying to neutralize my accent completely. I focused instead on clarity and confidence. I realized that fluency doesn't mean invisibility. It means effectiveness. And that mindset shift felt freeing. There is a subtle pressure in the United States to fully assimilate, to become seamless. But complete erasure is not integration. It is disappearance. Marriage gave me a stable base from which to explore identity without panic. One afternoon, riding the subway again, a habit we kept returning to, I asked him something simple. When you think of home, what do you picture? He smiled. Wherever we're building something together. That answer felt abstract at first. But later, I understood. Home is not a fixed point. It's a shared direction. In the U.S., mobility is normal. People relocate for jobs, education, opportunity. So tying identity strictly to location can create constant instability. Instead, we began defining home through values. Safety, respect, growth, partnership. If those existed, geography became secondary. Of course, questions remain. Long-term plans are still evolving. We haven't decided every detail of our future. And maybe that uncertainty is part of adult life, especially in a globalized world. But I no longer feel fragmented. I am not half one thing and half another. I am layered. An immigrant professional in America. A wife in a cross-cultural marriage. A woman who once feared speaking English, now telling her story in it. Belonging didn't arrive suddenly. It formed slowly, through conflict, through compromise, through repeated choice. If you are navigating identity while building a life abroad, Here's what I've learned. You don't have to choose one version of yourself. You don't have to prove loyalty by erasing growth. You can expand without betraying your roots. Destiny may have introduced me to my husband on a subway platform. But belonging? Belonging was built, conversation by conversation, decision by decision, in a country that once felt temporary. And maybe that's the real transformation. Not just finding love, but finding home within it. Was it destiny, or did we build it? The final reflection. If you've followed this entire journey, from the subway meeting to marriage, conflict, identity, and redefining the American dream, then this final chapter is not about a dramatic ending. It's about perspective. The title has always carried a question. I met my husband on the subway. Can destiny be accidental? After everything we've lived through in the United States, career pressure, immigration stress, cultural adjustment, emotional distance, rebuilding connection, I can finally answer that question honestly. Meeting was accidental. Staying was intentional. When I first moved to the U.S., I believed destiny was something magical. A perfect moment. A cinematic encounter. Something like a scene from Before Sunrise, two strangers meeting unexpectedly and feeling immediate connection. And yes, the subway moment felt like that. Two tired commuters. A glance. A conversation that wasn't planned. But destiny, if it exists, is only the introduction. The real story began afterward. Living and working in America taught me that nothing sustainable is built passively. Not careers. Not financial stability. Not emotional intimacy. And not marriage. Over the years, we faced external challenges. Visa uncertainty. Career transitions. Relocation decisions. Financial planning. Cultural blending. But the deeper challenges were internal. Fear of not belonging. Fear of drifting apart. Fear of losing identity. Fear of choosing wrong. Each time, we had two options. Let circumstances decide for us. Or decide together how to respond. That is when I understood something powerful about relationships in the United States. American culture emphasizes choice. Individual agency. Personal responsibility. Marriage here is rarely described as fate. It is described as commitment. And commitment is active. There were seasons when love felt easy, laughter on weekend subway rides, quiet dinners, shared inside jokes. There were seasons when love felt like work, difficult conversations, uncomfortable honesty, recalibrating expectations. But the most important realization came quietly. Destiny may create opportunity. Character sustains it. When I look at our journey now, I don't see a perfect couple. I see two people who kept choosing alignment over ego. There were moments when silence almost replaced intimacy. Moments when ambition almost replaced presence. Moments when identity confusion almost replaced confidence. But every time, we return to the same foundation: conversation. Language shaped everything. As someone who once had to consciously train my ears to understand fast English, I now see how deeply communication influenced our marriage. It wasn't about advanced vocabulary. It was about emotional clarity. I feel disconnected. I'm scared. I need reassurance. I'm proud of us. Simple sentences. Strong impact. Living in the United States accelerated my growth, professionally and personally. It pushed me to become more direct, more transparent, more accountable. And those traits strengthened our relationship. There is a misconception that love stories are defined by their beginning. The how we met narrative becomes the highlight. But beginnings are easy. Consistency is rare. One evening recently, we were once again riding the subway, not because we needed transportation, but because it had become symbolic. I asked him the question one more time. Do you think it was destiny? He smiled, the same calm expression from years ago. I think destiny opened the door, he said. We decided to walk through it. That distinction matters. Too often, people wait for signs. Perfect timing. Perfect certainty. Perfect readiness. But building a life, especially in a country that constantly demands resilience, requires action before comfort. If you are watching this story while building your own life in America, working long hours, adapting to a new language, navigating relationships, here's what I want you to take with you. You don't need perfect circumstances to build something meaningful. You don't need perfect English to express real love. You don't need perfect clarity to move forward. You need willingness. Willingness to communicate. Willingness to repair. Willingness to redefine success together. The subway meeting will always be a beautiful memory. But it is not the most impressive part of our story. The impressive part is this. We kept choosing each other when it was easier not to. We stayed curious instead of defensive. We protected connection in a culture that rewards constant productivity. And maybe that's the real answer to the original question. Can destiny be accidental? Yes. But love, real, lasting, resilient love, is not accidental. It is built in small conversations. In shared financial decisions. In Sunday check-ins. In quiet forgiveness. In choosing alignment over pride. The American dream used to mean achievement to me. Now it means partnership. It means creating a home that reflects both of us. It means building stability without losing softness. It means evolving without drifting apart. The subway was a moment. Marriage became a mission. And this story, our story, is not extraordinary because it began by chance. It is meaningful because we chose to continue it. Again. And again. And again. What if that subway ride was just the beginning of yours? If you've been here from part 1 to part 12, you didn't just watch a love story. You witnessed evolution. From a random subway encounter in the United States, to dating across cultures, to marriage under pressure, to conflict, silence, identity, and rebuilding. This was never just about, I met my husband on the subway. It was about this deeper question. Can destiny be accidental, or do we build it ourselves? And maybe the real reason this story resonates isn't because of romance. It's because many of you are living your own version of it right now. You're building a career in America. You're learning English, maybe B1, maybe C2, maybe somewhere in between. You're navigating relationships, identity shifts, ambition, immigration, belonging. You're wondering, am I in the right place? Is this relationship strong enough? Can I really build a stable life here? What if everything changes again? Here's what this journey taught me. Destiny may introduce you to a moment, but consistency builds the life that follows. Meeting someone on a subway is chance. Staying through visa stress? That's choice. Communicating through misunderstandings in a second language? That's growth. Choosing each other after silence? That's maturity. Redefining the American dream together? That's alignment. And here's the part that most people don't talk about. Building a life in the United States, emotionally and professionally, requires both resilience and softness. You have to work hard. But you cannot harden your heart. You have to adapt. But you cannot erase yourself. You have to grow. But you cannot outgrow the person you chose to build with. If this story sparked something in you, curiosity, hope, reflection, then maybe this channel isn't just about storytelling. Maybe it's about transformation. On this channel, we explore real-life love stories that go beyond fairy tales, cross-cultural marriage in the U.S., emotional intelligence in relationships, identity and belonging as an immigrant, communication skills that train your ears like a native, B1, C2 masterclass energy, but real-life application. The psychology behind staying, not just meeting. Because improving your English is powerful. But improving how you communicate in love, conflict, ambition, and vulnerability? That changes everything. If you've ever asked yourself, can I build something lasting in a country that once felt temporary? Can love survive pressure? Can destiny really be accidental? Then you're in the right place. This is not a channel about perfect couples. It's about real growth. It's about choosing alignment over ego, clarity over silence, connection over performance. And maybe, just maybe, your subway moment hasn't happened yet. Or maybe it already did, and you're in the middle of building what comes next. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you reflect on your own journey, subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Like this video to support more real, cross-cultural life stories. Comment below, do you believe destiny is accidental or built? I read every comment. And your stories matter here. In the next series, we'll go even deeper. The psychology of long-term attraction. Why smart couples still drift apart. How to rebuild intimacy after emotional distance. And how mastering communication in English can actually strengthen your marriage. Because this wasn't the end. It was the foundation. The subway was just transportation. The journey? That's still unfolding. And if you're ready to build yours, intentionally, courageously, consciously, stay with this channel. We're just getting started.